Welcome to Better Teaching, Only Stuff That Works, a podcast for teachers, instructional coaches, administrators, and anyone else who supports teachers in the classroom. This show is a proud member of the BE Podcast Network, shows that help you go beyond education. Find all our shows at bepodcastnetwork.com. I am Gene Tavernetti, the host for this podcast, and my goal for this episode, like all episodes, is that you laugh at least once and that you leave with an actionable idea for better teaching. A quick reminder, no cliches, no buzzwords, only stuff that works. My guest today is Weston Kieschnick. Weston is considered one of the world's most recognizable and sought-after speakers and educational leaders. He is an award-winning teacher, best-selling author, TEDx speaker, coach, husband, and father. He is the author of the Educator's Atlas, Bold School, Breaking Bold, co-author of The Learning Transformation, A Guide to Blended Learning for Administrators, and the creator and host of Teaching Keating, one of the most downloaded podcasts in the United States for educators and parents. Weston has worked in collaboration with innovative tech and publishing companies such as Google, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, Apple, to refine and redefine teaching and learning in schools. As such, he's advised educators from every state in the U.S. and more than 30 countries around the world. District where Weston has worked has designed content, implemented initiatives, and trained educational leaders that have been recognized by the Learning Council as one of the top 10 in the nation for their work in blended learning. You can find Weston's work published in EdWeek, EdTech Magazine, The Spark, and featured on TED, The 10-Minute Teacher, Teaching Tales, Kids Deserve It, and Lead Up to Teach. Connect with Weston on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, or at westonkieschnick.com. Weston and I talk about everything from teaching and learning, teaching and tech to parenting. I think you're going to like this one. Hello, Weston. Thank you for being a guest on Better Teaching, Only Stuff That Works.
Awesome, Gene. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate you.
Well, as we said before we got recording here, I became a fan after I read your first book, Bold School, and it was 2018, I think was the published date. And
Boy,
so
doesn't that seem like ages ago?
Yeah.
Lots has changed since I wrote that book.
Well, and that's what I want to talk to you about, but I think one of the things that, got me to be a fan of yours in that book was the idea that the technology isn't going to teach.
It's not. Yeah.
The teacher teaches. The technology is great to provide rehearsal, to provide practice, provide repetitions, all of those things. And that I really bought into that. That made sense to me. So
you know what? It made sense to me too. It's why I wrote the book. It was like, man, I'll tell you this. I don't think I've actually talked about this on a podcast before. One of the catalysts for me writing that book was I did an event at Google. And one of the, they show up and the Google for Ed people are all there. And one of the Google for Ed people, and this was maybe in, 2014, 2015. So this is a few years before I even wrote the book. But one of the basic premises they were operating on was like, hey, we believe that technology can move to a place where it can not only surpass, but essentially supplant the role of the classroom teacher. Like we can standardize and use technology in such a way. And I remember sitting there thinking, good God, I hope that's not true. I hope that's not true as a teacher. I hope that's not true as a parent. And so that moment, stuck in my brain and frankly, stuck in my crawl so much, I was like, I don't think there's ever a space where the most important thing we put in the classroom is the technology more than the teacher. And that was really the impetus for that whole book.
Can you talk a little bit more about the book? Because I still think it's a must read for everybody.
No, I appreciate that, man. And so the basic premise behind Bold School is just a mashup of the words blended and old as a constant reminder to all of us that as we pursue new paths towards blended learning, and we're always pursuing new paths and frankly, I don't even like to call it blended learning anymore because any teaching and learning that we're doing with kids right now includes technology in some way, shape, or form. So as we're pursuing those paths towards, technology integrated instruction, the fact is our old school wisdom has to come with us on that path. And when I'm talking about old school wisdom, I'm talking about those instructional strategies that we know work, that have worked with kids for a really long time. I leaned into John Hattie's work really heavily for that book to say okay, if we're going to bring an instructional instructional strategy like reciprocal teaching, which John tells us has an effect size of greater than 7/10, into the modern classroom, like how can we use tools like Pear Deck or Nearpod to elevate as opposed to replace a strategy like reciprocal teaching and make it more effective and efficient than it's ever been before. And that was the whole premise for that book, to say like we can't continue to have conversations about digital tools that occur independent from instructional strategies. Because otherwise, like any innovation that we throw into a classroom is rudderless. Like the conversation that we have about digital tools, like, whether it's GimKit or Kahoot, has to be like, okay, these are tools that are vehicles for questioning and feedback. Questioning has an effect size of 0.48, feedback has an effect size of 0.74. So, like, let's talk about questioning and feedback and then how those tools can support those strategies. And that's sort of the mindset that we need to approach the integration of technology with in our classrooms. But it's not what I was seeing, and it's not what I was experiencing as a classroom teacher. And I thought that those conversations were necessary, as especially our veteran teachers didn't see where they fit in the new world of digital instruction.
My experience is they still don't. And I think, we have uh, anybody who listens to my podcast know that I'm going to talk about silos, and I'm going to talk about this, one of the big silos in education is the tech people. And I
Yeah.
always make a joke. You can always tell the tech people because they have all the stickers on the back of their computer.
God,
And
it's so funny because it's so true.
yeah. And so as you're talking about this, you mentioned at least 4 or 5 different platforms just in a couple minutes.
Yeah.
And I think if we could talk about this for a second, there's other things I want to
Yeah.
talk about,
Yeah.
but the idea that, okay, so let's say I'm an old school guy, I'm a teacher, and I feel like I'm pretty good. My kids, I got good scores every year, and now I've got these platforms. You want me to use these platforms? Which platforms? Well, here's 4 or 5 you could use. Well, geez. And then you know what's going to happen? Then they're going to be, there's not 4 or 5. We're in a school district right now. There were 15 different platforms being used
Oh.
throughout the district. So that becomes an issue. So do you have any suggestions for those teachers for choosing platforms, or any suggestions to school?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. So, like, step number one. So, if you're like, Gene, you're a classroom teacher, I'm talking to you about this, and you're like, hey, I've got all these, like, what do I use? The first thing I want to know from you, Gene, is like, okay, what is it that you do best? Right? Like, because everybody in every walk of life, you find success by figuring out, like, hey, what are the things that I do best? And then you build around those things. And so, like, the first thing I want to know is, like, what are your go-to instructional strategies, right? What are you a master at? Because if it's questioning, if it's feedback, if it's metacognitive strategies, things like think pair shares or quick writes or think alouds, if you are the reciprocal teaching master of the universe, or you are a science or math teacher and you love problem solving teaching as a methodology, right? Model, problem, discuss, struggle, intervene. Like, I want to know first and foremost what you do best. And then I think the role of a lot of the tech people out there isn't to show you like, hey, here's 15 tools. It's to be able to say like, no, here's what this teacher does really well. And because I'm an expert at all of this tech and all of these tools, here are the 2 or 3 that I would suggest that I think can elevate what this teacher is doing, and not just make them more effective, but make them more efficient in the work that they do. And that's a thing that I think a lot of our tech coordinators and people around the country, I don't think they've done a good enough job of answering that question. We do a really good job of answering the question of like, hey, how does this, enhance teacher efficacy? But we do a really bad job of answering the question of how does this address teacher efficiency? Efficiency when it comes to planning and delivery of instruction. Because I'll tell you this, if I'm a classroom teacher and you give me a tool and that tool is going to cost me more time in terms of my planning and less efficiency in terms of my delivery, guess how many times I'm going to use it? Zero. Zero. Or I'll use it the one time that you pop in, you do your observation, and I need to show you that I'm using the thing, and then you're never going to see it again. So I think that number one, we have to figure out what do you do best. Number two, match the tools to the thing that you do best. And number three, answer the question of not just efficacy, but improved efficiency.
You gave an answer, and I'm going to say you gave a current day answer, that this is what you do right now when you're working
Yes.
with folks. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go back in the time machine to 2018. Was anything different? Has your thinking changed about use of technology. You're going to have a 2.0, a old school 2.0 with updates,
I
or
mean,
are you pretty consistent because it wasn't specific about tools, it wasn't specific about uh,
I'm yeah, I'm actually happy with how evergreen that book has stayed, given sort of its peripheral focus on technology. Is there any, I'll tell you this, and it's not, I touched on this a little bit in Bold School, but this is actually an opinion of mine that has changed. It's done a complete 180 over time. And I wrote about this in Bold School, and I did a blog post about this once upon a time that went viral, where I talked about the use of cell phones in school. And this, sorry, this may not be the path that you want me to take, so if it's not, just let me know. But my thinking around the presence of cell phones in school used to be dramatically different. I was a hardcore advocate for the presence of cell phones in our schools and the ability for teachers to be able to use them in their instruction. And my opinion on that has changed completely. But also, I will say that was my opinion in 2016, 2017, 2018, when the digital divide in this country was massive. It was massive. Like, forget about the schools who had gone one to one and the ones who hadn't. I'm talking about schools who had gone one to one and schools that didn't have reliable internet access. Like, that was a massive divide. And if COVID did anything positive for us, and the things that are positive that came out of that are few, I think the one positive thing was it bridged the digital divide really quickly for schools around the country because so many schools were forced in a place where it was like, hey, we have to catch up. Our kids are about to go home. We don't know for how long, and we've got to make sure that they go home and they can have access to the school, their teacher. And so many of our schools went one to one. And because that's the case, and there's so much more equity around technology in our schools, I'm not an advocate for cell phones in our schools. I'm actually looking at some of the bans that are happening around the country. And quite frankly, I think those are good for kids and good for teachers. Almost every stitch of research that's out there right now says that the presence of your cell phone with like any proximity to you whatsoever, even if it's off, and that's the amazing part. Like, even if your phone is by you and you've turned it off, the fact that it's near you decreases productivity over time. And it's like, okay, we've got enough research, we've got enough data around this. Like, we've seen these in our schools for long enough. And you know what? Like, they're not helping our kids. They're sure as hell not helping our teachers. And I'm not an advocate anymore.
It's interesting. It is very clear. All you need to do is to be in a school and watch the kids, and
Yep.
you will get to your opinion very quickly.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh
you will have the whole school in agreement. And then I'm observing classrooms yesterday. Kid wants to use the restroom. Okay. So, they have a system now where they have to use their phone and they check in with the QR code
yeah.
to so we need to rethink some things,
I we
yeah.
Yeah, we're doing these bands. I was thinking about this because my kids own high school. Next year is sort of rolling out a phased out, like for the freshmen next year, like it's no phones for them in classroom, and they're going to phase it by grade level. I'm not sure how that's going to work, quite frankly, but we're
Yeah.
going to see. But I'm thinking about like, okay, when my son shows up to do weight training for football in the morning, he's got to access the programming via the Train Heroic app, and then he's got to record. Well, we've required our kids to do so many of the logistical things via their phones, and now we're going to pull those out, and people are going to have to rethink that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I will tell you one other thing. This is not phones per se, but we're working in a school, and we gave everybody training about all the problems with phones, many of which you just talked about, and devices in general. That
Yeah.
we just, after COVID, we just became so dependent on these devices. And as teachers have begun to do less with the Chromebooks, the kids respond positively. They're sick of it too.
They're
You know,
yeah, they're fatigued too.
yeah, you
They're
know,
yeah.
yeah,
I think
I
that's been the most surprising thing. Don't you? Like I anticipated seeing pushback around the country because there was a huge pendulum swing post-COVID where people were so sick of doing everything here
yeah,
that a lot of people got back into classrooms and those Chromebook carts sat and gathered dust and kids liked it.
yeah. In some classrooms and in other classrooms, it was almost as if it was a virtual classroom in person.
Yes.
Everybody was still, it was still on. So we're still figuring it out. I think we're figuring it out. That's where I think, the evergreen nature of your book is something that folks should read. And the other thing that to piggyback on something you said about your own book, it talked about strategies of good teacher that good teachers do. It wasn't you're on your own, anything goes. No, there are some things that we know are effective, that we know that work, and that
Correct.
are going to work with when you bring the technology in.
Yeah.
One of the things that we know that one of the issues with the phones that we just brought up is attention. And then you wrote another book, Atlas, where one of the A was for attention.
Attention.
Could you talk about attention a little bit and how you addressed it in that book
Yeah.
and how important it is?
Yeah, no problem. So Atlas is just a book on engagement. This is a word that we use in our profession all the time. Everyone's talking about engagement, especially right now. Our kids are less engaged than ever before. And so I was super interested because what I kept hearing in schools around the country was people would talk about engagement in different ways, and there was not a clear, like, nobody that I talked to could clearly define engagement in a really succinct and meaningful way. And what I actually found was that so many educators were using the words engagement and fun as though they were synonyms. And I was like, ooh, that's not like fun isn't the main event in terms of what should be happening in our classrooms. Yes, should they be joyful, engaging, successful? All those things should be true, but fun is not the main event. Learning, growth, and development, like that's the main event. And so if we're telling teachers to be more engaging and they're interpreting that as fun, I was like, that's a problem. So step number one, it was about like, let's establish what we mean when we're talking about engagement, right? Engagement isn't fun. It's curiosity, participation, and the desire to persevere. And if those three things are present, people are engaged. Okay. Step number one, let's get on the same page. And then step number two was like, okay, I wanted to know what the world's most engaging teachers do. Because if we can distill it, we can replicate it. And that book actually took me about 12 years to write because I went in thousands of classrooms to try to figure out like what is it that they're doing? Because engaging teachers already exist. Like I wish, Gene, that I could take people around the country, put them in my back pocket with me, because the incredible things that I see happening in the nooks and crannies of our country it's remarkable. And so I was like, okay, these engaging teachers already exist. What are they doing? And after thousands of observations, I was able to distill like, oh, okay, like number one is engagement is formulaic. Like that's a thing we have to acknowledge. I talk about that a lot in the book. And then number two, it's like, okay, what's the formula they're following? And Atlas is just an acronym for what engaging teachers do all the time. They are like the A stands for attention, the T stands for transition, the L stands for lesson, the A stands for activity, and the S stands for summation. And the more of these things that are present, the more likely kids are to be engaged. And what I found was that masterful teachers were masters of capturing and holding student attention right when kids walked in the door. They used transitional phrases that were repeated for emphasis because what gets repeated gets remembered. They taught a clear and concise lesson that was aligned to a priority content standard, and then they always followed that lesson with an activity. There was a doing thing, a way for kids to wrap their heads or hands around the content in ways that weren't possible, and then the summation, right? Notice I didn't say summative assessment, summation, right? Masterful teachers understand that learning is sticky when it's tied to emotion. And they were really clear about those summative activities and the things that, like the closer of their lesson. And they understood, like, hey, the feeling kids feel when they walk into my classroom can't be boredom, and the feeling they feel right before they walk out can't be failure. Because if those are the two prevailing emotions, they'll forget everything that happens in between. And so it was like, oh, if we can identify this, we can distill it, then we can replicate it. Because I refuse to believe that the world's most engaging teachers are just more talented than the rest of us. Like these are things that are learned over time and they've bumped into them and they show up over and over.
And I think as you talk about those things, you don't take anybody's personality out of it. Doesn't matter what
No,
your personality is, it's personality neutral,
correct.
and it's also technology neutral.
Bingo. Yeah. And you don't like so many teachers felt boxed out of engagement because they were like, oh, I'm not funny. And being engaging has nothing to do with being funny. There's zero correlation between teachers who are funny and teachers who are engaging, right? And so it's like, I didn't want teachers to feel like, oh, because I'm not, insert personality trait, like I
Yeah.
can't be engaging because it's not factual.
When you were listing those things and people
Yeah.
couldn't see you, but you were, it's
Yeah.
on your hand.
Yeah.
What that told me was that teacher, that engaging teacher, had a structure
Yeah.
that the kids understood. The kids, even if I came in bored, hang in there, buddy. This guy hasn't let me down before. Just
Yeah.
hang in there a little bit and we'll get there. And I think that's one of the things, we hear. And you did not mention creativity. You did not mention, these wild, how can I teach this lesson? And then the next day, how can I teach this lesson? No, you have that structure
Yeah.
and that predictability, and the kids are going to trust you. The kids are going to be with you. And you know what? You can even suck one day, and the kids are going to be with you.
Yes. Yeah. You know what? Because we're all going to suck and we're going to
Yeah,
suck for more than one day. That's
yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
Yeah. My
yeah,
my daughter actually just came home and she was raving about one of the teachers she has. And she was just like, guys, I'm so sorry. Like today's just one of those days it's kind of boring and it's gonna suck. But you know what? We're gonna get through it because tomorrow we're gonna be right back with. And my daughter came home and that dude, Gene, that resonated so much with her. Like she sat down and told me, and for a 14-year-old girl to be like, Dad, listen to this about school. And it doesn't have to do
yeah.
with recess or lunchtime. She like kids appreciate that. They're lie detectors, man. If we think something's boring and we're trying to masquerade like, hey, this is exciting, they see it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. So, one of the other things you talked about in Atlas, and I know you talk about in other things, is you talk about the relationship building,
Yeah.
and you talk about it. Well, you talk a lot about it in another book, but how we hear about relationship building all the time. And I talk about when I talk about it with coaches, instructional coaches who I train, I say, this is not a relationship about being friends. This is more of a professional relationship. This is like I tell them, like you have a favorite doctor. Why do you like that doctor? You like that doctor because it's competent. They listen to you. They're going to give you advice for you, just like what you said at the beginning of this conversation. You're going to ask a teacher, what are you best at?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's so when you're talking about student teacher relationships, what are you talking about, and how do you work with teachers on that?
We're talking about a lot of the same things, right? Which is step number one and rule number one. Like when we're talking about building relationships, we're not talking about friendships. Those are two very different things. And we've all seen it, like a lot of our newer teachers sort of confuse the two, right? They either adopt the don't smile before Christmas garbage piece of feedback that's been passed around for ages, or they adopt the like, oh, I'm gonna be like the cool guy, cool girl teacher. Like we're friends. No, 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 no. Like we're not friends with kids. We build relationships with kids. And so when I'm talking about building relationships, again, so much of my work is really about distillation, distilling big concepts down to actionable steps. And so, relationships is another one of those words that gets thrown around all the time. And so, like, I'm really interested in, like, okay, what are the habituated behaviors of people who are awesome at building relationships? And I try to get down to, like, okay, let's take a look at some of these behaviors. Things like trust, right? That's a cornerstone for any healthy relationship. Things like clarity, right? Things like teacher expectations, student self expectations, right? So, like, I want to distill down to the nitty gritty of the behaviors and say, like, okay, let's take one of those habits, right? Let's take a habit like trust. Trust is a cornerstone for any healthy relationship. So I talk to teachers all the time and I'm just like, okay, I ask them, like, hey, have you had conversations about trust with your kids? Gene, what do you think everyone said? Yes, of course. And I said, and then my next question is always like, okay, what is trust? Dude, that shouldn't like that it shouldn't be a hard question,
Yeah.
but it's real. What do you mean, what is trust? Well, it's a simple question. It's a word you keep saying over and over. What is trust? And so, like, let's understand what it is. Trust is believable behavior over time. And it's like, okay, how do you build trust? And I usually get like a long list of answers. Okay, how do you break trust? Another long list of answers. No, simplify. There are two ways to build trust. You say you're going to do something and you do it, or you say you're not going to do something and you don't. That's how you build it. Guess how you break it? You say you're going to do something and you don't, or you say you're not going to do something and you do it. Trust is that simple, right? Stop overcomplicating this for kids. And then we have to show up as trustworthy in the classroom. And we have to, in those moments where our kids don't demonstrate that they're trustworthy, we have to default back to like, hey, remember, what is trust? Believable behavior over time. And we have to be water on a rock and drip away and wear away at negative behaviors and then constantly redirect towards more positive behaviors. And that's how you build trust.
Let me see. I disagree with you slightly.
Okay, good. Let's
Okay.
talk about it.
I would say with today's kids, redirect, redirect, redirect.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's, there is a palpable difference, in the attention of kids. And we have developed systems to really degrade that trust. I mean, you talk about having, operationalizing these words. How about high expectations for kids? I mean, one of the high, to me, you operationalize it by being trustworthy. I hadn't said this before, but now I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
And I'll give you credit for a while and then I'll forget to give you
You
credit.
don't have to. Put it in your back pocket.
Yeah.
Claim it as your own.
But that idea is the high expectation is, I'll have teachers say, oh man, my after school class, I can't get them to do anything. They're just different. And so the response is, well, what are you doing different? How are, if you know,
Great question.
you
Yeah.
know who they are, how are you going to impact that? Because you know what, that's, I don't know what the other parts of the relationship building is, but one of them has to be that I believe in you, Weston, and you know what, I'm not going to let you do this.
Yeah.
You can't go to the restroom for 15 minutes because I
Yeah.
bet you're doing that 6 times a day.
Yeah. And, and guess
So
what?
yeah.
I'm going to notice when other people pretend like they don't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
Our kids they are different. They are different. And I like that you keep using the word different because I don't want to say worse. They're not worse. They're just every generation of kids has been different than the ones before. But our kids are experiencing this moment unlike anything we've experienced where they wake up and from the moment they wake up for a lot of them till they go to bed, they are fed a constant stream of dopamine from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to sleep. And then they jump into our classrooms and cell phones go away and there is no dopamine and the crash is hard. And we chalk that up to attention. And it's like, hey, I don't think it's as much attention deficit as it is withdrawal, is what we're experiencing. And
Yeah.
I don't think enough people are talking about that. Like our kids aren't suffering from attention issues, they're suffering from a withdrawal issue from the constant stream of dopamine they've received up until the point they walked into your classroom.
So you're doing a nice segue into another little thing that you're doing that I've seen you on LinkedIn, the 10-second, 10
Yes.
second. What are they called? I'm
10,
not saying.
10-second truths. I can't believe how much these have blown up.
Oh, well, and what made me think of it, I wanted to talk to you about them, but you just had one about childhood. We haven't modernized childhood, we've domesticated it.
Yeah. I stand by that. That's a 10-second truth. I stand by that one. Yeah.
Can you
Kids
can you expand on that a little bit?
kids have a modernized experience of childhood for sure. But we as adults have not modernized the childhood experience. We've domesticated it. We have put, like, a lot of parents have put incredibly tight boundaries around childhood, where the idea of free play is a thing of the past, completely a thing of the past. I'm sure I had a childhood much like you did, Gene. I don't know about you, but like literally summer would roll around and I remember vividly my dad, like I had a few days of summer break where I had slept in, done nothing, laid around the house, and my dad came in one morning and literally opened my door and he was like, "You're out." I think I was maybe 13 years old, right? He's like, "You're out." I was like, "What do you mean I'm out?" He's like, "Go outside, go do something." I was like, "Where am I going to go?" He goes, "I don't care, just not here." I said, "When do I need to come back?" And he was like, "Street lights come on, you come back home." And I just left. Nobody knew where I was.
Yeah.
Nobody asked where I was. I went over to my buddies. I played backyard football. It was the best summer of my life. Best summer of my life because my dad kicked me out. Said, "I don't care where you go, just go do something." Like kids don't have that experience. They have play dates. They have club soccer and baseball and club volleyball. Like every moment of their day is structured. And so that's what I mean by the domestication of childhood. there's for so many of our kids, there's almost nothing free and open to it. And any time that is free and open is spent either here on the phone or here, two hands, in front of video games. Like that's what I mean when I say we've domesticated childhood.
Well, when I saw that, I'm trying to I had a feeling that's what you were talking about, kind of like what John Haidt talks about, in his book that we're protecting our kids. And then, but the use of the word domesticated, it reminds me of my wife and I have two cats
Yes.
that do not go outside, you know,
Yeah.
and I bet they would love to go outside, but you know why they don't go outside? We're afraid.
That's
We're afraid. It's the parents who are afraid.
yeah.
And unless the student, I always think of Susie, unless the kid has the opportunity to face some small fear to get over it, then we're going to transfer that fear onto them.
Yeah.
And we're going to continue to have what you talked about. Because even though that was your experience with your dad, I bet you still don't give quite as much freedom to your kids as you
Of,
had.
of course I don't. Of course I don't. And and the irony of that is not lost on me, Gene. As I'm
Yeah.
sitting here, it's just like I literally just told you, like, it was the best summer of my life.
Yeah.
But I will tell you this, like the moments when my son and my daughter, like I also lucked out a little bit. Like we live in an awesome neighborhood, and my daughter's 14. Her best friend Brooklyn lives right down the street. And there's so many times where like our front door will open and I just hear, I'm going to Brooklyn's.
Yeah.
I'm so happy.
Don't forget your phone.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Don't, yeah. I'm going to check on you on Life 360. You're not going to know I'm checking all the time, but I'm going to check to make sure you're safe. But I love that,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
when my
Yeah.
16-year-old son like jumps in his car and he and his boys are going up to In and Out, and then they're going to go up to the field and they're going to throw and they're going to play football. Great. Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Do it,
No.
do it
No.
every day. I want that for you.
I love that we're kind of talking about some of this stuff because, again, I told you where I began to be a fan, but as I began to look at you, you have a podcast with your wife and you take on a lot of these issues, that are just kind of just general life issues.
Yeah.
And it's very entertaining. And one of them is getting back to teachers being funny is, can you teach someone to be funny? What did you guys conclude?
Molly answered this so quickly. She said no, absolutely not. But also, full disclosure, we have a lot of disagreements in our family. This is, I would say, a bi-weekly argument that we have at our dinner table, Gene, where we will sit and the four of us will argue about who the funniest person in our family is, right? My wife claims it's her. She's 100% wrong about that. It's my daughter, Charlotte. She is the funniest person in our family by far. But then I am undoubtedly the second funniest person. And nobody in my family agrees with that, Gene, which I'm just like, hey, people pay me to show up and tell funny stories like in
Yeah,
my keynotes.
right,
Had
right.
people come up and yell at me after a keynote, like, hey, I had this woman in Texas come up and she said, I drove 4 hours to hear you tell the bull riding story. And I'm like, I'm sorry, it's not in this keynote. So, like, oh, and I'm like, has that happened to any of you at this table? And they're like, oh, whatever, dad, because I'm dad, I don't know anything.
Yeah,
And so, like, we have that argument all the time. And I think you can teach people to be funnier. I don't think I don't think you can teach funny, like super funny. Like
yeah,
I'm talking like Nate Bargatze, Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock, Adam Sandler funny. Like I don't think
yeah.
you can teach that. Yeah, I think some people just have that. I think you can teach people to be funnier.
I think so. I think so too. And it is, but it's so like so many things, they have to want it. They have to want it because part of it is an awareness. It's like
Yeah.
what you just said, all the thousands of classrooms that you went in to discover what makes this teacher engaging. You got to do the same thing with comedy, with being funny. And not
Yes.
even comedy, just having a sense of humor. Okay.
Yeah, I could geek out about this topic all day. Like
Yeah.
just talking about comedy. Like I love listening to stand-up comedians, their podcasts. Like I have watched comedians in cars getting coffee over and over
Yeah.
because I'm so interested in how all of those people talk about their process. And I'm interested in it from an educator's lens because I'm curious if you agree with me on this or not. I think there's something inherently performative about the work that we do as classroom teachers with kids. Would you agree or disagree?
I'd agree. I'd agree at a baseline level. That's the baseline. There
Yes.
is, and an anecdote to kind of prove that. Well, one anecdote doesn't prove it. N of one is not enough. But you probably had this experience too. I'll be training teachers, and there's this little wallflower, in the training, and you think, God, am I getting through to this person, taking notes? And then you go into the classroom and they just explode. I mean,
Yes.
they're just a huge personality.
Yeah.
And I don't know which one is which. I don't know which one is the real one. But actually, as I said that, I should say they're both real. That's who they are. This is who they are as an individual. This is their teacher persona, but it's not real. That's just who they are.
I know, but I'm always confused by people like that. Are you? Because I'm not like that. Who people see when I'm on the road is exactly who I am, right? Like I'm this enthusiastic, I'm this obnoxious about it. Like I'm
Yeah.
sorry, it's how I wake up in the morning. Like I don't have that sort of on and off switch, so I'm mesmerized by people like that.
Yeah. No, I'm like you. I'm like you. I would love to talk about being funny, but I
Yeah.
should probably be talking
Sorry.
to your wife because you're only
How
number
dare you?
two in the
How
family.
dare you?
It's funny you talk about, you're just dad. I have a 38-year-old daughter. She'll be 38 this year. And we were down visiting, and she had one of her friends at her house. And she's in Southern California. And her friend, I hadn't met before, had been, a college soccer player. She's an actress. She's been in stuff that we have seen her in. And
Cool.
I'm just real curious. I'm just asking her questions. And I'm having this great conversation with this friend of my daughter. And my daughter turns to her and said, I should have warned you about him.
Uh, That's a
So
universal rite of
it,
passage in becoming
it
a dad, is you just apparently just become immediately embarrassing to your children.
yeah. Okay. So you've seen lots of teachers. Okay. You've observed lots of classrooms, and you gathered all this information about who's effective and how they are able to maintain attention. And then you wrote a book, a more general book
Mhm.
about performance. Are these teachers a subset of the high performers, or what did you discover? What's in your book about high performers?
Yeah,
What did you
absolutely.
find?
Absolutely. Like obviously, the education is my world, it's my wheelhouse. So there's tons of relevance for educators and there's references to educators in this book. But I was, like Gene, all I ever wanted to do, like I wanted to teach high school social studies and I wanted to coach high school football when I entered into this profession. That's what I wanted. Quite frankly, there's a lot of months where I've been traveling too much and I
Yeah.
threatened my wife, I'm going to go back and do that.
Yeah,
Right?
no,
Now,
I'm sorry, I had to interrupt you. I'm just laughing because I always say I'm that cliche as well. I just wanted to coach football, but I had
yeah,
to teach social
yeah,
studies.
right? Yeah, it's like that's what I wanted to do. It was the
Yeah,
beginning and
yeah,
end of every ambition that I had in
yeah.
education. And now for a long time, I've had this really weird and wonderful job where I get to travel around and I get to meet and talk to incredible people and I get to speak at conferences where other really, high achieving people are speaking. And so I've gotten to have really interesting conversations and build really interesting friendships and relationships with high achievers from almost every category. And I was just like, I started thinking not just through my educator brain, but also as a parent and as a coach, as a person who runs my own business. It's just like, okay, as an educator, as a business person, as a father, as a spouse, as a coach, like there are things that I'm noticing about all of these people that are universally applicable. And if we can just, the hidden work is really just about like eliminating the pitfalls that underachievers default to over and over and instead redirecting towards the behavior patterns of high achievers. And I'll just list them out real quick. So, if you look at the habituated behaviors of underachievers and low performers, you'll find over and over that in the midst of adversity, they default to these four things. They default to things like blame, excuses, self deception, and the propensity to give up. They like low performers will default to one or more of these behavior patterns over and over. But if you look at top performers, again, it's not talent that separates the two. It's the consistency to default to, instead of blame, they default to ownership. Instead of excuses, they are highly focused on solutions. They have a profound solution mindset. Instead of giving up, they are exemplars of what grit looks like, sounds like, and feels like. And instead of self-deception, like they tell themselves the truth about who they are, the work they put in, and what they're capable of. And it's just like, man, and again, if look everywhere, like people who are listening to this, like, oh, if things aren't going well in my marriage, guess what you'll find? You'll find tons of blame, excuses, self-deception, and people who are giving up, right? If you look at businesses who are that are underperforming, if you look at athletes that are underperforming, if you look at students and teachers who are underperforming, if you look at business leaders who are like, you'll find these things to be universally true. And the good news is all of these things are fixable. They're all fixable and they cost
Right.
us nothing. It costs us nothing to adopt a new set of behaviors that leads to improved performance. And that's the thing I'm super passionate about right now.
I can see how that's impossible not to bring that message to schools
It's
as
yeah,
well. Yeah, it's
it's
just
impossible. It's
yeah.
impossible. I like, and that's I don't I don't write books because I want to or I care about selling books. I write books because it's like something worms its way into my brain and it's like I can't sit on this and just keep it for myself and my kids and the kids that I coach and there's the students that I get to see. Like I have to share this because I think it can help so many people.
Absolutely. That sounds
Yeah.
great. Well, I could ask you questions all day. Wes, do you have any questions for me?
I do. And it actually came up. I've been trying to glean as much expertise and wisdom as I can. You mentioned that you have a 38-year-old daughter, correct?
Yes.
All
Yes.
right. I've got a 16-year-old son, I've got a 14-year-old daughter, and I am staring down the barrel of what feels like an existential crisis. And forgive me, I'm sure you wanted more of like an education type question, but I'm going to take this opportunity to be selfish, if it's
Sure.
okay.
Sure.
I want to know, because my wife and I will lay awake at nights and be like, man, we've got 2 more summers left with our son. And then he's off. He's got to go live his own life. And we have 4 more left with our daughter. I want to know from you, like, with the benefit of hindsight and wisdom, what are the things that we should be doing more of? And what are the things that we should be doing less of?
Well, the number one thing you should be doing more of is finding a better person to ask for advice. Because I can't remember who it was, but took quite a few psychology courses. And I remember somebody saying by the time a kid gets to be 12 or 13 years old, you've done all you can.
Oh,
And then it is, whatever you have instilled at that point, all your values and all the lessons, it's up to them, and because all the good things that my daughter has done, my wife and I will say, where did that come from? I mean, because that's not us, you know,
but it is,
and
man. I think you're sandbagging a little there. If I'm being like that, there's profound foundational elements that have to come from you and your wife. They have to.
well, I appreciate you saying that. I'll
Yeah.
let my daughter know next time I see her. But I don't have advice. I mean, I remember being at a conference, and after all the speakers were sitting around a table having dinner, and everybody's telling horror stories about my 24-year-old son. I can't get him out of the house. So I told him, I'll tell you what, I'll give you 6 months. I'll give you 6 months, and then you got to find your own place. But up until then, I will take care of you. And so it gets toward the 6 months, and Dad says, well, did you get a place? He goes, oh yeah, I got a place 2 months ago, but I was to save the money that you said that you would. I mean, and it just like went around the table like that. And I'm thinking, I am so, we were so blessed. My daughter couldn't wait to get out of the house, you
Yeah.
know? And again, why? I don't know, but that's the way I was. I mean, I couldn't wait to get out.
Yeah, I was too.
So maybe that message got out, but boy, I wish, I'm just going to tell you, have faith in the job that you've done. And, I think you'll see the fruits of that as you watch your kids thrive.
I hope so,
Uh,
man. And you know what? I think you gave me a good piece of advice. Like by 13, 14, like the bulk of the work is done. And I think I probably need to have transitioned a long time ago from authoritative parent to facilitator and guide.
Well, just think of the anecdote you shared about your 14-year-old daughter talking about what she saw at school.
True. True.
Look, there's an example. There's a
Yeah.
great example.
Well, and the good news is I've had plenty of conversations with my own kids where I've had to walk upstairs to their rooms and be like, hey, I really screwed that up. I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
And those won't be the
Yeah,
last one.
yeah.
Yeah.
I hear that. I hear that. You know what, Weston? It was a joy talking to you. It's a pleasure meeting you.
Right back
And
at you, my friend. Gene, thanks so much.
hey, my pleasure. And any last words for teachers? Any big something funny or motivational? You don't save your bull riding story.
Yeah, I'll save the bull riding story. I'll just message I'm giving teachers around the country right now, and I want every, not just teacher, but every educator in every level of the profession to hear, like, I'm begging you, like, stop lighting yourselves on fire to keep everyone else warm. It's a thing that we do in our profession all the time. We light ourselves on fire to keep our kids warm, our communities warm. And the fact of the matter is, like, we have to get better at finding the balance in this work, right? We have to
Yeah.
give ourselves and each other time and permission to close the lid, step away, spend time with people we love, spend time with people who love us. Tell teachers, spend time with your own kids, because we can't keep asking them to take care of other people's children and not giving them the time, grace, space, and permission to take care of their own.
Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you, Weston. We'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, brother.
If you're enjoying these podcasts, tell a friend. Also, please leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. You can follow me on Blue Sky at G Tavernetti, on Twitter, X, at G Tavernetti, and you can learn more about me and the work I do at my website, tesscg.com. That's TESSCG.com, where you will also find information about ordering my books, Teach Fast, Focused, Adaptable, Structured Teaching, and maximizing the impact of coaching cycles.